What's up, everybody? Anthony Cosenza with the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast and CincyJungle.com here. And we're bringing you something a little different this year on the podcast, adding to our slate of all kinds of different shows that we have. We're bringing you a little fantasy football, a little survival pool, a little NFL lines, betting type of action or advice. And since I routinely finish in the cellar of my respective fantasy leagues, I thought I would bring in our good buddy, the Orange Arrow, Derek Davis, and he has his own YouTube channel, his own shows that center around fantasy football, center around betting and whatnot. So I am going to lean on his expertise, some things I'm hearing and seeing, and maybe you could take my advice and do the opposite of it on these shows. But Derek, how you doing, bud?
All right, how are you, man? I'm excited. We are almost to week one, man. Technically we're in week one right now. How exciting is that?
It's pretty cool. It seems it's based on what happened last year and how everything was so wonky last year with all kinds of different stuff. It just seems a little surreal that, college football, you're seeing kind of full stadiums and all this kind of stuff. It's just it's kind of like, are we there yet? Are we? But hey, you're right. It's a lot of fun seeing football kick off again, and of course, excitement level and optimism is high for our Cincinnati Bengals. We're gonna talk about a few different things here. We're gonna talk about some players that Derek has identified as his some good plays for week one. We'll maybe talk about survival pools and some of the best plays there, and then we'll share some NFL lines across the league, including that of the Cincinnati Bengals, and see where some good bets may be had based on all of that. So let's start, Derek, with you had identified a number of different players at respective positions in a fantasy football lineup. We had an interesting discussion about the quarterback position before we took the air here. You had an interesting play and idea there that I don't think a lot of people thought of, but I think it's a pretty smart move. I don't know if you want to start there and then we can go to other positions. I don't even know if that's a quarterback play that you're going to mention, but I figured maybe why not start with the quarterbacks on a fantasy football lineup and go from there.
Yeah. So starting with the quarterback position, what I like to do is in my starts of the week, I want to look at you've got your top 12 quarterbacks that, generally speaking, let's say your top 10 quarterbacks. Your top 10 quarterbacks, generally speaking, you're going to start them no matter what. But those next 2 to 4 are what they call your flex worthy, where you're your streaming quarterbacks, where if you have a quarterback playing in a better position or against a better team, maybe you'll start them. So one of the quarterbacks that I looked at outside of that top 12 to 14 was Sam Darnold going up against the New York Jets. Obviously, we don't have a whole lot on the Jets defense, but judging on preseason and stuff that I got to see, it looks like Sam Darnold could be in for a potentially good week one.
Okay, and here's kind of I guess a caveat with that. I mean, do you think that Sam Darnold, is it just because you think the fit works well there in Carolina for him, or do you think that this is just kind of a revenge situation where he's going to go in and play against his old team and kind of have a little something to prove, maybe a little bit of both? Maybe just a change of scenery for him is going to do him some good. I don't know. I just, when you told me about this before we took the air, I thought this was an interesting play, and especially given some of the other options that may be out there for some people.
Yeah, I mean, in my eyes, the revenge narrative definitely played a part. I know everybody likes to talk like there's never a revenge narrative, and some people don't think that that's true. But I mean, just look at Mitchell Trubisky in week 3 or week 2 of the preseason up against the Buffalo Bill or up against the Chicago Bears. He absolutely flambasted them. I mean, there is definitely something to be said about that revenge narrative. But you got Sam Darnold with his buddy, and his name is
Robbie Anderson.
Robbie Anderson. I don't know why I was thinking Robinson was his last name, but yeah, Robbie Anderson. is his starting wide receiver. I think he'll end up being the wide receiver 1 on that team, but they've got that great connection from their times in New York. But I could definitely see them lighten up the Jets defense.
Okay, so that's a quarterback play of the week, courtesy of the Orange Arrow and his fantasy show. Interesting stuff there. Robbie Anderson just signed a contract extension to stick with the Panthers as well, which obviously there's some good chemistry brewing there. So is there one where you'd kind of say at quarterback, maybe stay away this week, and or proceed with caution, not necessarily sit, but maybe temper expectations as you start this player at the quarterback position in your fantasy lineup?
Yeah, and that's what when I first wrote my sits of the week, like I told you before we started, I hate saying that because generally speaking, you're not going to sit these players. But I guess you would temper expectations on Justin Herbert up against the Washington football team. That defense is no joke. I mean, you've seen what they did to Burrow last year. You've seen the kind of, terror this team can absolutely put on any football team. Plus, they got William Jackson. So I definitely would temper your expectations for Justin Herbert. I could see him finishing outside the top 12 this week.
Yeah, probably not a regular thing for Herbert to either sit or temper expectations. He can put up the big numbers, but as we know, that Washington defense can be pretty ruthless. They've got a ton of good pass rushers, Chase Young and Montez Sweat, and a lot of others. They can play well on the back end, and they just give a lot of teams fits. And then, of course, as you mentioned, that game is on the road. So not an easy matchup for Justin Herbert to start off his NFL career. He's getting a lot of hype. He's getting a lot more hype than Joe Burrow is at this point, and I guess for some good reasons. But I think also Joe Burrow is going to have a pretty good season in his own right. What about running backs? What do you see in running backs? This is always a tricky play because week one's weird, man. You never know who's really good. You never know who's really not. And then of course, some of these guys are coming back from injury. Saquon Barkley, that's been kind of a coin flip if he's going to play in week one, and if so, how much. Some of these teams may rely a little bit more on the run early as they kind of get things going in their offense. You never know. They kind of want to maybe play it safe especially with one less preseason game and the whole deal. So your take on the running back in terms of a good play this week, whether it's a sneaky sleeper one or one that's just kind of, hey, Captain Obvious, here we go.
Yeah. So like I said before with my quarterbacks, running backs are the same thing. I like to, because generally speaking, you're going to start 2 running backs in your fantasy league. So I wanted to look at running backs that are outside the top 24 that you could potentially start for the week. And the one guy that I noticed immediately, who I have actually as a sleeper on the year, is Damian Harris for the New England Patriots. Damian, they traded off Sony Michel. Yes, he has the quarterback or the running back that he's a rookie. I can't think of his name right now. And then they've got James White as the pass catching guy. So you still got 3 guys there, but Damian Harris is going to get the bulk of the majority of the touches there. So I could definitely see him against Miami being a potential start for the week. Okay.
That's another team that's always tricky in terms of their running backs. They'll have a guy. Remember, who was that guy that came up randomly one Sunday night game a couple of years ago, and he had like 3 touchdowns?
Yeah, it was their full. I can't think of his name right now.
I don't even think he's in the league anymore. Just had that spurt randomly where he just had this insane game, and then they kind of cycle through running backs and they have them do different things. There's not kind of a bell cow back necessarily, but that's a good play there. I agree. So that's good. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that as we are on the air. I like that. Let's go wide receiver. What are some of your best wide receiver plays this week?
So one of the wide receivers that I have as a start of the week would be Brandon Cooks. I know he plays for Houston. Everybody's worried about Houston. I mean, they're not going to go 0-16. Brandon Cooks is going to get over 100 targets in that in that offense. Yes, and I did get a notification that Tyrod will start for week one. So, yes, he has Tyrod or however you want to say his name. He does have him throwing him the ball, but he's going to have 100 targets this year. So I definitely expect Brandon Cooks to finish as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 guy.
So I guess my question with that the thing that I would think about with you're talking about, hey, don't sleep on Brandon Cooks, even though that team and that offense seems to be a mess. There could be here's a couple of things that I can think of. Number one, Tyrod doesn't light the statistical numbers up on fire, but he is efficient when he plays. And number two, a lot of this, I would assume, if they are going to be a bad team, especially early, I think there's going to be a lot of garbage time stats that could pile up here.
Yeah, and that's another thing you've seen. Even when he was in Buffalo, you would see, anytime they were down, they were losing. Which I think Tyrod was a good quarterback in Buffalo. I don't really think he got the chance that he really deserved. Now they got Josh Allen, so obviously they've upgraded. But I mean, you could see him in that. I hate to compare him like this, but in that, and his name is killing me. The guy from Jacksonville a couple years ago that absolutely lit it up with garbage time stats. Blake Bortles.
Oh, Bortles.
Yeah, Blake Bortles. I mean, he ended up finishing QB7, I think his last year, or QB6, something like that in fantasy. They had a terrible year, but he still lit it up because of garbage time. So I could see, Brandon Cooks getting a lot of those targets and stuff like that. So,
okay. Tight end. Who do you have here as a good play this week? And maybe one that you don't like the matchup, if you can think of one off the top of your head.
Yeah, so this will be my Bengals player start of the week right here for tight end. I love CJ Uzomah. Obviously, he's going undrafted in a lot of leagues. I'm picking him up in every single league that I play in because I think he's being disrespected in the fantasy community. Yes, Burrow has a lot of targets in the system to go for, but I think you could really tell with the first 2 weeks that CJ Uzomah was available for Burrow, that Burrow really, really looked for him and really trusted having him there. So, yes, I know everybody talks about the fantasy pie, and there's a lot of targets to go between Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, all those guys. But don't sleep on CJ Uzomah, especially going up against Minnesota, which I done a little deep dive against their defense, and they were kind of middle of the pack as far as defenses against tight ends. So look for CJ to be open in the middle of the field a lot this week.
That's a really interesting take there, and there's something to be said about obviously the comfort level with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, but I think as Joe Burrow kind of tries to come back from that injury, gets out of his own head, all that kind of stuff, which we think he's already out of his own head. But as he's coming back from that, the offense may sputter a little bit or may have some dry spells. It would make quite a bit of sense for him to go to kind of the old reliables in Tyler Boyd and CJ Uzomah across the middle of the field, get those kind of easier completions in those short intermediate routes. Especially with Jamar Chase still trying to figure things out with the drops and all of that. Higgins looks like he's going to be a monster this year, but I think early in the season that does make sense. Harrison Smith is a pretty good safety, so he may be tasked with guarding Uzomah a little bit. And so that's not a great matchup, but like I said, I think there's a good point that you make there in terms of Burrow maybe going to some of those more old reliables, if you will, in CJ Uzomah and Tyler Boyd.
Yep. And that's another thing with, like you said, with Harrison Smith. Yeah, he might be on CJ, and then that play he might go to Boyd, or vice versa. I could see him. That's what's great about our defense or our offense is we've got really good talent, on all levels of the field. We got Joe Mixon in the backfield. In the kind of intermediate or middle of the field, you've got CJ Uzomah, you've got Tyler Boyd, and then the stretching, you've got T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. It's going to be really hard for teams to defend that.
Yeah, it definitely will, especially as some of those guys get a little more experience and a little more time under their belt. Mostly talking about Higgins and Chase there. Specialist defense, before we move on, I don't know if you got any plays there for kicker, special teams, defense, all that kind of stuff, and then we can get into some other aspects for the week as well.
Yeah, so kickers, I'll just go with Evan McPherson every week. I mean, that's seeing that guy kick. I absolutely loved it. So that's my start of the week every week is Evan McPherson. He'll end up – no, I'm just kidding. But I do like the thought of McPherson this week being at home. His first game, yeah, he's a rookie. But he reminds me a lot of Burrow in the fact that it seemed like nothing really wavered the guy. He kicked a 57-yarder like I was out there kicking a 15-yard field goal. You know what I mean? He goes out there. He's cool, calm, and collected. But, yeah, I would go with him this week as a kicker. And then a defense that I like this week, I didn't have one prepared, but I'll go through here and look really quick. You know what? Let's go with Carolina's defense. I kind of like what they have going on as far as their defense goes, and plus they're going up against a rookie quarterback in his first ever career start. So let's go with Carolina's defense. I like that a lot.
Okay, good stuff. The interesting thing too about the McPherson play, at least. Again, we're talking about the Bengals offense maybe having a little bit of growing pains so far, potentially going into the start the season. So, relying on some field goals may be something they need to do. Let's transition a little bit. Do you play survival? And obviously that's kind of a one oftentimes a miss and you're out type of thing. Sometimes if you have a generous commissioner, you get one strike, but that's usually a one-shot thing. What do you have this week in terms of a potential good play for those who play survival football?
Yeah, so a lot of times what you like to do in survival is you want to save, those good teams that you think will hardly lose a game. You want to save those guys for later on in the year. That way you've got them to go to if you can't find one. Well, in my eyes, week one is kind of the same. You want to go with a more reliable team to use because you don't know where all these teams are going to line up. So what I ended up doing was went with San Francisco. They play Detroit week one. And you'll notice every week when we do this, a lot of times what I'll say is, okay, who's playing Detroit this week? Because I don't look for them to win a whole lot of games. But obviously if Detroit's playing a team like Houston or something like that along those lines, I'll probably venture off to another team. But, yeah, San Francisco, I think they're if you was looking at the betting lines, I think they're at 7.5 or 8. So Vegas thinks that they're definitely going to whoop up on Detroit as well. So survivor pick would definitely be San Fran.
Okay, and that is in Detroit, so a little bit of a risk there, I guess. But makes sense. Detroit seems like they're kind of a mess, as does Houston. So good stuff there. Let's go to the lines here. Some sports betting here, and I will pull up some lines. And this is courtesy of thelines.com. We are not sponsored by them, but I thought that was a cool website because it gives you a lot of different options here. I don't know if there are a couple of games that just stick out to you. I don't know if you want to stick with the Bengals. I guess we could start with the Bengals and Vikings. You were able to grab a 3.5 line in terms of the Bengals. That has since dropped to 3. So how are you feeling about that one?
Yeah. And actually, if you wanted to, I just checked it on betonline.com. And this is one of the things that Anthony and I will talk about. What's great about this site he's showing you is he's showing all the different lines for each site. So if you wanted to go to find the best value, so I'm looking at betonline.ag right now, and their line is still setting at 3.5. So if you wanted to grab the Bengals at plus 3.5 to beat the Vikings, and they're actually, that is minus 122. But if you think the Bengals are going to win outright, I mean, they are plus 145 to win the game outright. So if you think they're definitely going to win and wanted to take the point or take the money line, you're going to get more money that way.
Okay. Good advice there. What else you feeling in terms of, I mean, here's the Niners there. We talked about Niners at Lions. You talked about them being a good survival pick. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll cover the spread. 7.5 across the board there, depending on which side you're looking on. I don't know how you feel about a line like that. Obviously, a pretty hefty one.
Yeah, week one, I definitely would kind of steer away from that line. Plus or minus 7.5. That's meaning they're going to need to win by more than a touchdown. Could I see that happening? Definitely, but with Detroit being at home, you got to look out for that backdoor cover. So I would definitely steer away from that. One of the ones that I liked, if you want to find it, is Denver minus 2.5 over the New York Giants.
Okay.
I don't know. And you got it minus 3. So
yeah. Well, DraftKings has it minus
okay.
3. The rest looks like it's 2.5 everywhere else.
Yeah.
And you get another 3 there. Play Sugar House. I'm not familiar with that. And Unibet has 2. So a little bit of some differences there, but
Denver Broncos minus 2.5. All I got to do is win by a field goal for you to cover. So I like that one. And then another one that I like is the Seattle Seahawks are minus 2.5 over Indy, and I think they are, and that is at minus 125 is your odds.
Okay.
For that. Okay. So I like that one a lot too. I think that Seattle team's going to be really good, and I think they'll start off. And one of those other things, Indianapolis, we're not sure who's starting. They've got a lot of COVID issues and a lot of. I think is their guard slated to play this week? I can't remember if he was back fully healthy from that foot injury, Nelson?
I have not gotten an update on that. Let's see.
But yeah, I know Carson Wentz is supposedly supposed to be ready. But of course the coach said if he wasn't 100% healthy, then he wasn't going to play him, but I definitely think, even if he's 95%, I think they'll put him out there.
Yeah, I think both of them, it sounded like actually the foot injuries weren't as serious as, or at least, they gave like a 5 to 12 week timeline or something like that. And I think they were trending towards it looking pretty good for both of them to come back close. And then I think both Wentz and Quentin Nelson got on the COVID list. And then, there's been kind of a little bit of a messy situation there, but that's a really interesting game. The Colts, what are they doing at quarterback? And that obviously is affecting things. And then, the Seahawks seem like a very well-rounded team, but they're going on the road. It's week 1, hard to figure that one out for me, at least.
Yeah. And that's another thing, just with everything that's been going on over in Indy, it's hard to see them coming right out the gate, all cylinders firing, you know what I mean?
Right.
So,
right.
And then the last one I had that I liked a lot was Houston plus 2.5 over Jacksonville. Jacksonville just kind of in the same way as Indy. There's a lot of stuff going on right now over in Jacksonville. So it's hard to know how that team is going to fare out week 1. But I like Houston to get, if they're going to get one win this year, I look for it to be that week 1 game.
Okay. Interesting take. And you can see here the points. It's either 2.5 or 3, depending on who you go with there. Yeah, that provides another interesting take, because obviously Trevor Lawrence, rookie quarterback, we think he's going to be pretty good, but how soon will he be pretty good, right?
Yep.
This game is on the road for Jacksonville, so I mean, and Houston could be one of those teams that everybody we could be looking at our survival pick, or a lot of people picking Jacksonville maybe in this one as their survival team, and then all of a sudden one of those weird week 1 situations where who's good, who's not, and all of a sudden Houston gets a win at home, and then they don't win many other games the rest of the year. I don't know. So
yeah, and that's another thing that you're looking at, with them being plus money, plus 2.5. So as long as they lose by less than a field goal, you're going to win that bet. But if you wanted to take them with the money line is plus 130. So if you think Houston will win outright, you can get some pretty good odds and make some pretty good money there.
Awesome. Do you have a lock of the week, or something where you're like, hey, take this one to the bank? Whether it's a fantasy football, I mean, we've given you all kinds of different advice here from the Orange Arrow, he's a commish of a charity fantasy league with numerous teams. He has a YouTube channel and a show based primarily around fantasy football and whatnot. So we are taking your advice, my friend. Do you have something where you are saying, take this one to the bank, go make some money? I don't know, or just do a friendly wager with some friends and buy a round of drinks for them or whatever. What's your lock of the week, if you have one?
Yeah. So first things, I want to preface this by saying this is for fun. If I lose money from on everybody, I'm sorry, but we're just trying to have some fun with this. And then obviously, if you do have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I would say Cincy plus 3.5 would be my lock of the week. I definitely don't see us, but if we do lose, I don't see us losing by more than a field goal. So that would be my lock of the Orange Arrow lock of the week. Cincy plus 3.5.
Okay, so that's I know some people will say homerism. But, look, there is some merit to that. Game at home, the Bengals haven't opened at home for, I think that in week 1 they haven't opened for quite some time, if I remember correctly. I'd have to go back and
actually
look, but
we opened week 1 last year, but all of that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, that's right. But no one was there, so it felt like they didn't really open at home. But here's the thing with that, and this has been kind of something that has plagued the Zach Taylor era for his time since he took over in 2019. All the 1 possession losses, right? Some of them are by a couple of points, some of them are by a touchdown. A tie is in there. So yeah, there are a number of different games in which the Bengals could have won, should have won, whatever, that are 1 possession scores. And so that's I think, though, that what you're trying to say is a lot of Bengals fans could very well be very happy after this weekend, because this seems like a tough game, but a winnable game. And I think that's how a lot of people are viewing it at this point in time.
Yes. And I don't know if you caught my show I had Emily Parker on last Wednesday, and she said that there are a limited amount of tickets available. So it's looking like we're getting close to being a sellout. So you got the crowd, you got the energy, you got the guys like Mixon, Burrow, all those guys that feed off of that energy. I could definitely see us coming out with the victory on that game.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I will be there in person. I know you will be there as well. So hopefully the Bengals end up pulling out the win for all of us here. Get the season started off correctly, get the Joe Burrow era back on track after the injury, and get things moving full steam ahead.
Yeah, there's 3 things in life that are certain: death, taxes, and the Cincinnati Bengals covering. It seems like last year they covered almost every single one of their losses, and obviously every single one of their wins. So look for them to cover week 1 this week too.
All right. Well, those are your fantasy players of the week that you got to look at. Those are your survival pool plays of the week that you got to look at playing to stay alive after week 1 in those. And then, of course, some locks of the week and different lines for you to potentially bet on, make some money on, what have you, courtesy of the Orange Arrow, a.k.a. Derek Davis. Go check out his YouTube channel, the Orange Arrow Fantasy Channel. Where can people find all your stuff, Derek?
Yeah, so if you want to, I'm over on YouTube. That's the Orange Arrow Fantasy Show. And then on Twitter, I'm at the Bengal 4. And if for some odd reason you wanted to follow me on TikTok or anything like that, I think I'm at the Bengal 4 over there as well. So I think that's all I have. And then, of course, Derek Davis on Facebook, if you wanted to go. If anybody even uses Facebook anymore. I know I use it a little bit, but I'm mostly on Twitter and YouTube and stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. We're hoping to continue this on as a weekly tradition to give the listeners of our show something a little bit different. We talk a lot of Bengals, we talk a lot of AFC North and whatnot, but I think there are also, I would assume, the vast majority of our listeners play some form of fantasy football. So we got to give them the information. And of course, this show is presented by Simbull, Simbull, and you can go to Simbull, and this is another way you can go and potentially make some money for yourself based on basically investing in certain teams, whether it's the Cincinnati Bengals, whether it's another team out there, maybe you've got a sleeper pick, what have you. But if you go to simbull.app/OBI, you use the promo code OBI, you can buy shares in teams and make some money off of them. So go check that out. If you play fantasy football, if you play survival football, if you play the regular stock market, whatever, you got to add Simbull to your rotation there. Simbull. Fun way to play. I know a number of our listeners have taken advantage already, but go to simbull.app/OBI. Use that promo code OBI to get some incentives as you sign up. This is kind of a long-term play. It's something that you can have some fun with for quite a while, make some money off of one team, move into maybe even a different sport and make it in another. But good stuff from Simbull. We're happy to be partnering with them throughout the season. Derek?
Absolutely. The Bengals are actually currently at $55 a share, or just over that. I think $55.38. So if you want to invest in the Bengals, and then our Redlegs, they are at $30.65 a share. Hopefully we can make, I know there's about 20 games left. Hopefully we can make the playoffs, but it's looking a little iffy. We'll have to see what happens with that.
Yeah, that NL West is getting competitive. I know it's kind of making things difficult for the Reds there, but good stuff, Derek. And by the way, the price on the Bengals and Simbull, that was quite a bit lower when we first signed up as partners. So if you got in on the ground floor, you already made some good money investing. Yeah,
absolutely. I bought it with my $10 off from Bengals OBI. It ended up being $15 a share is what I ended up getting it at. So
good for you. Good for you. You made yourself some money, my friend.
Yep.
That's awesome. Well, hey, thanks for your sage advice. I hope our listeners take heed of that advice and have a successful fantasy, survival, all kinds of different things, betting weekend. And of course, we hope that the Cincinnati Bengals have a successful week 1 as well. We'll be back with more picks, more fantasy plays, and all of that going forward. Thanks, Derek. Take it easy. I'll see you out there in week 1, my friend.
Absolutely, brother. Hoo day.
All right. Hoo day.